Let's talk to Chris Mcgovern from the Campaign for Real Education. Chris, a very good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Mike.
Sorry to keep you holding on there, but just a little bit of breaking news about the state of the union, as it were, such as it is. Interesting weekend for the Labour Party, but you may not wish to comment on that. But let's talk a bit about what's going on in our schools, because funnily enough, and I know this is a slightly side issue, you know, the Batley by-election, which is going to take place because of the elevation of the MP to become the mayor of West Yorkshire, is in the very constituency where we were focusing some weeks ago on the teacher who's had to go into hiding. And somebody tells me he's still in hiding. Is that your understanding?
Well, I don't know the story, what's going on there at the moment, but certainly he was forced into hiding, it would appear, yeah. Strange things going on in the world of education. They get stranger by the day. I guess next week we'll have something even more strange.
Well, exactly right. Let's talk a bit about what went on as far as this Trent College situation is concerned, because we found out at the weekend an ex-Cambridge College chaplain said that his new job, which should have been to teach young minds, turned into a sort of Orwellian nightmare, because he suddenly found himself in the midst of a lot of people chanting very strange things.
Yeah, it's really strange. When I've heard this story, first of all, I just assumed it's coming out of North Korea. But apparently it's not North Korea, it's Nottingham. Yeah. So this is actually happening. And there we go on complaining about the North Koreans and all their chanting and parading around. And now it's actually taking control of our it's actually a private school in this case. Very sinister, I think, Mike. And I'm quite concerned about this because we have a chaplain here. You know, he's got his views. He's a Christian. He has his views. They don't necessarily coincide with some of our community, but you have to be able to express those views. I mean, when I was a head teacher, what I told children constantly was you treat other people as you want to be treated. Yes. And that's the end. We stopped the discussion there. That was it. Yes. Here, though, we've got a school which is promoting a particular agenda. Look, it might be a good agenda in many ways, but it doesn't mean to say you close down all other ideas. And, we've got the World Cup coming up shortly in Qatar next year. And in Qatar, they don't hold those sort of same ideas. You can go to Qatar, and if you're gay, you can, and if you're practicing gay, there's a death penalty. Yeah. Now, we say, oh, that's because the Qatarians, like a lot of Africa, as well as Arabia, have different views from us. But we can't just go around condemning half the world because they don't see the things as we see them. So, you can't close down freedom of speech. And to actually say to a chaplain, look, your problem is you're a Christian. So those views of yours, your views can't be aired. If you've got a few doubts about the LGBT agenda, you can't mention this. This is brainwashing, and it's brainwashing of staff as well as pupils. It's sinister developments, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a woman called Ellie Barnes seems to be at the centre of all of this, and these are the kind of people that you only find out about because newspaper reporters actually go and do a decent job. Run something called Educate and Celebrate, which is an organisation which goes around to various teaching establishments, schools, colleges, etc., sort of convincing people that they should have certain views. Now, I would, like you, be slightly concerned about an organisation that convinces people about what views they should have.
A lot of that's going on in teaching. These days, you won't even get into teacher training college if you haven't got the right politically correct views. They sort of check you out on these things. Right. So one of the reasons, I think probably why quite a few teachers, nearly half, leave the profession within 5 years, is that the profession is not about teaching maths or physics or French or history. It's about promoting wokeism and politically correct views. A lot of teachers are unhappy with that. They want to teach their subject. But no, these days, the job is about promoting a new society. We sometimes talk about a revolution. Well, the revolution is over, Mike. We're now in a post-revolutionary situation. Woke is the new religion. And what we saw in that school, what we hear about that school, it's like a religious cult. Yeah. And that school needs to be inspected. They need to send inspectors into there. We need to uphold freedom of speech in this country. Well, if we don't have that, we don't have anything.
And it's interesting how it works as well, because she's obviously got quite a good shtick, for want of a better word, where she starts off her kind of class, if you like, with general pieces of information about how you can stop bullying, how you can also, increase diversity in the school and that kind of thing, which, of course, doesn't apply to an awful large portion of this country anyway. But one of the things they ended up doing was chanting these various different slogans, including my favourite, I think, has to be this one, smash heteronormativity, which is actually quite hard to say, never mind chant.
Very difficult to say. I think listens to this programme, and most people in the country don't agree with that. most people in this country, most parents do not want their children to be indoctrinated by brainwashed teachers. And, sometimes we get what we think are political surprises. And Boris Johnson doing very well last week in Hartlepool. It wasn't really a surprise because ordinary people want common sense. They don't want politicizing of education. They don't want life to be controlled by this woke brigade. And there is starting to be a counter reaction now. People are actually saying, I've had enough of all of this. I want my kid to have an education. I want them to know math. Look, we've got a problem in our schools with low attainment. Internationally, we're about 3 years behind. We've got to catch up. Never mind about the wokeism. Leave that to the religious side of things. Let's focus on the subject. Let's focus on literacy and numeracy. Getting these kids employable.
Exactly. And I mean, this guy's named the Rev Dr Bernard Randall. Apparently he's unemployed currently because he's having trouble getting a position as a chaplain because, one, nobody wants a chaplain, and two, they certainly don't want one who happens to be a Christian.
And that is the big problem in all this, isn't it? All he's saying really is that there are other points of view and you haven't got to be just taking one point of view. Well, that's fair enough. I mean, I think everybody would agree with that. Certainly Jesus Christ would, and most religious leaders would. Yeah, there are different points of view. But wokeism, which is the new religion, will not tolerate anything like that. They're witch hunters. They're looking for heretics, and they found one here. It is disgraceful. That school needs to be really made to be accountable for what it's been.
And what is current school policy, Chris, in terms of, we all know Gavin Williamson sits in the Department of Education and occasionally does something, but normally waits until he's told to do something. But what sort of level of power and control comes from the local councils now?
Well, quite a lot. I mean, the thing is, I've worked at the education department for decades, really, on and off. They call me in occasionally, don't know what I say, so I don't get called back for a few years. But essentially, the education department doesn't like it's spineless. It's a cowardly department. It doesn't want to upset people, so it lets schools get on. And I was a trade unionist, so I'm not criticising unions as such, but the unions are allowing this to go on. They're allowing the promotion of these woke ideas. So everybody's afraid. What I'm saying to you now is heresy. I'm a teacher. Well, I was a teacher for 35 years, a head teacher, and I spoke out of my own time and got persecuted for that. But, it's very difficult for teachers to stand up because they lose their livelihoods. You're not going to hear much from the classroom these days because teachers are cowed into this. They daren't say anything. And that's why they just leave. That's why in the end of the day, they had half of them get out as soon as they can, which is a tragedy because it's a great job. It's an important job. It's an energizing job, But for heaven's sake, what we need is an independent inquiry, maybe a royal commission to look at the state of education in this country. It's failing in a lot of areas.
Yes, and also to look at who exactly is making up the curriculum and what exactly that curriculum is all about. Because, I only find out what my kids are being told because I have to ask them, and there's no real kind of communication process between the school and the parents, unless it happens to be a note to say that your son or your daughter has done something wrong. There's hardly, of course they have parents evenings and that, but you don't really discuss what it is that they're teaching them. And if you do start quizzing them and asking them sort of awkward questions, they're not very keen.
No, they're not. I'm a person who would advise. I get called in to advise 3 governments, in fact, on how to write the curriculum. I'm always pretty much a lone voice. There's always I remember years ago, now I'm going back into the 90s, talking to Margaret Thatcher, and that was before the first national curriculum came out. And she said to me, I've just looked at the history national curriculum, Chris. It doesn't include the First World War. What's going on? Right. Can you come down the street tomorrow and sort it out? She was shocked. At the time, she had dealing with the miners. She was very busy, but they're all surprised. The government, Boris Johnson be surprised. We've got a history curriculum, which I helped to write, but I objected to what came out. History curriculum, which doesn't require the teaching of any specific event in our history or any personality. Forget Churchill, forget World War II. They're not compulsory. No. You don't have to teach them, and therefore you can get away with anything. So it's anarchy. It's you can do what you like. It's like the teachers can decide, and if they're brainwashed into a particular view, they use history as a vehicle for promoting particular agendas.
Yeah, well, one of my kids was learning, and I've got no objections of learning about the Vietnam War, but it's not particularly relevant to anybody living in this country at this particular time, especially if you're not talking about other things related to British history. But there's a sort of obsession with not doing British history and doing everybody else's history.
But the politicians don't understand that. They don't. When I say to you now, you haven't got to teach World War II, you can't believe it. People can't believe it. You have to shoot it. And I see intelligent ministers and I see commentators thinking, well, yeah, we've got too much British history. No, you haven't got too much British history. You're not required to teach any specific part. You're required to teach British history, not specific, but you are required to teach world history. So, for example, there's a compulsory list of world topics. So West African history, which is important, or Islamic history, they're on a compulsory list. Nelson and Wellington aren't even mentioned.
Right. And that's the thing that's wrong, because it's all very well teaching all manner of different types of history. Great. But, you've still got to have a few basic planks, surely.
Well, it's crazy. And I see a couple of years ago, I remember there was a service in Westminster Abbey to remember the Battle of Britain. And we had the politicians there, the Prime Minister singing the hymns. And I thought, look, this was Mr. Cameron's time, actually. You don't understand what's going on. You have removed from the national curriculum any requirement to teach World War II, let alone the Battle of Britain. And kids should know about these things.
Well,
but they don't have to. A lot of schools teach to some extent.
Well, because also it's an important kind of family bond, because you can find out from your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, you could find out what they did in that time. You've got an actual connection to it. It's in part of your country's kind of heritage and your country's history. And surely that would be an aid to kids learning stuff anyway.
Well, it would be, and kids are interested. And look, a lot of schools still do it. But the fact is, it's not a prescribed. It sends the wrong signal. I mean, hear a lot of these. I mean, Black history is a big thing these days. And I'm certainly not against Black history. But when I say to colleagues who Black community would like, that they agree with me. And I say, this country once had, back in Roman times, an African emperor. No one's ever heard, called Septimius Severus. He came to Britain. He invaded Scotland.
Yeah.
And when he do very well in Scotland, he came back to York and he ordered the mass extermination of everybody north of Hadrian's Wall. He died in York. Now, I say to my Black colleagues, look, Black people, white people, they're just the same. They do good things and they do bad things. So Septimius Severus, we mustn't teach him, because he's someone who actually ordered the extermination of people in northern Britain. So he's into genocide. Well, because he was American makes no difference. And we have this people like Mary Seacole, who's a very, very famous Black icon. I think she's great, but she was a racist and she was a colonial, and she put her life on the line for the British Empire. I don't have any problems with you like Churchill, but we don't have to damn Churchill and say, well, Mary Seacole's a hero. Right. But they're both the same.
I know, it is. It's totally bizarre. Listen, Chris, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Chris Mcgovern from the Campaign for Real Education, former head teacher himself, of course.